So, has anybody ever heard of, I don't know if anybody's going to want to admit this or not, but a place called the Bunny Ranch out in Nevada. The Bunny Ranch, I won't even do the sign of hands on this one. It's a legal brothel is what it is. And it's one of the country's legal brothels, and there's a TV show on HBO called Cat House, and the cameras are allowed in, and with God as my witness, I have no idea who these guys are who signed the piece of paper and say, yeah, I'm getting a prostitute, and I'd like to be on TV so everyone knows about this. I have no idea who these maniacs are, but you have to sign a release, and so somebody's signing a release to allow this to be on TV. Well, I was a guest on a show, the Judith Regan show. Her name's Judith Regan. She used to be a big publisher. She published one of the biggest publishers in the country, and then a couple years ago she published a book by O.J. Simpson called If I Did It, and it was the whole story of how he would kill two people if he did it. And people went so bananas that she lost her publishing company. She lost everything. Now she's in satellite radio, so it's a nice cushion. So anyway, she had me on her show, and she thought it'd be fun to have the Catholic guy and this Dennis Hoff, Dennis being the owner of the brothel. And because she wanted, I think, to see a fight. She wanted to see the Catholic yell at the guy with the prostitutes, and she wanted to see the guy, a pimp, I don't know the other word. I don't know, what's the legal term for that? I don't know what else you could call that. Yelling at me, basically. And as soon as we got in studio, he and I got along immediately. We were laughing, we were telling jokes. You could see that there was no animosity, and you could see he was very surprised by this. He didn't understand why this believer in God, why this Catholic, wasn't arguing with him, wasn't telling him he was going to hell, why I was just being like myself in the sense, and telling jokes and just having a regular conversation. And after the segment was over, he gave me his card and says next, because we were taking the show to Las Vegas for our anniversary. And he said, well, when you come to Nevada, look me up. And I said, well, I'm not going to do that, but it's quite an offer. I'm not going to lie to you. It's quite an offer. And now this Dennis Hoff character, he's always on. He's on every TV and radio show he can get on, literally. And he always brings his girls with him. Well, a couple months after meeting him, he was coming through New York. He was coming through Sirius again, and the way the company is structured, that you walk into this main lobby, and it's probably this big as a main lobby, and we don't have a green room the way regular TV and radio shows do. We think it's funny to have everybody who you don't think should be in a room together, and that way you literally have nuns and prostitutes. You have everybody, and musicians. They're all in one place looking at each other, trying to figure out what the other one has in common and why they're all there. And one night, I've seen Dennis every few months. And one night I was there, and it was after my show, and I bumped into Dennis and one of the ladies, and two of the ladies, actually. And so, hey, Lino. No, he didn't introduce me as the Catholic guy. He just introduced me as Lino. And he said, hey, Lino, this is, I don't know, a prostitute. I don't remember what their names are. Prostitute number 1 and prostitute number 2. I don't know what it wasn't a game show, but that's the best I can tell you right now. And so Cammie and Destiny were, I don't have a name right now. It's the best I could do. And so I was chatting with him and with them. And I said, oh, hey, nice to meet you. I didn't ask what they do for a living. I guessed. And so we were chatting, just, hey, how are you? Nice. After about 5-10 minutes of conversation, of just, normal human being conversation, the Dennis goes, oh, by the way, girls, I forgot to tell you the best part. Lino's the Catholic guy. And then they paused, and they didn't understand what that meant. And they said, what do you mean? And I go, yeah, I host a show called The Catholic Guy. I'm the Catholic guy. And the one girl goes, so you're religious? I go, yeah, I'm religious. And she goes, but you seem too normal to be religious. And I said, thank you. That sounds like a compliment. And then the other one, and of course, I'm insecure, so it really meant something. She's like, you're too cute to be religious. So I don't know what that means, but I like it. And so we're having this whole conversation, and we're having a real, and after it was revealed what I did for a living, you could see now they were on their guard. Now was there going to be judgment? Now was there going to be criticism? Now was I going to tell them to convert? Now was I going to try to save their souls? Or was I just going to continue to sort of meet them where they were and have a conversation? So after about 2 more minutes of just hearing what their day was, they weren't working that day. They were doing interviews, and a friend of mine his name's Father Jim Martin, and he's written a few books. He wrote a few New York Times bestsellers, My Life with the Saints and The Jesuit's Guide to Almost Everything. So Father Jim and I have been friends for a few years now, and Father Jim happened to show up to appear on a different radio show, a Catholic radio show. So he shows up, but he's not wearing his collar. So Father Jim, I see Father Jim walking in, and the girls, and here's Dennis, and I go, hey, Jim, get over here. I save him the agony of calling him Father Jim. And I say, Jim, get over here. These are the girls. So so he meets the girls, and he meets Dennis, and we spend 5 minutes of all talking together. And you could see he's wildly uncomfortable. And he wants to be anywhere but there right then. And he eventually moves in. And before he does so, one of Howard Stern's producers, who's a friend of mine, shows up as well. So I said, oh, hey, and so I'm like, hey, Lou, you got to meet. So now everybody's in the group. There's the religious people, and then there's the women of the evening, even if it was the daytime, and then there was the man in charge of those women, and then there's a guy who works for the Howard Stern show. And it was totally uncomfortable for everybody but me, because I liked being in this situation of being the Catholic guy who's not judging one, and so once Father Jim left, I could say to the girls, by the way, that was a Catholic priest. And they're like, but he seems so normal. And then when my friend Lou left, I said, that was my friend from the Howard Stern show. And they said, oh, that seems about right. And so, okay, judgment can be made sometimes. The reason I bring the whole thing up at the beginning of this was the highs of being Catholic that's the witness we can make to others, is meeting people where they are, and being religious does not have to mean being judgmental. It also doesn't have to mean not believing what we believe. If they want to have a real conversation about what I think in their lives is wrong, if they want to have a real conversation about anything, that's great. But at the end of my day, when I went to sleep that night, my prayer was that when they went to sleep that night, they might have thought about who they met that day, or they might have thought part of their day, and at one point they might say, that was weird, I met that religious guy, or I met that priest, and they didn't look down on me, and they didn't judge me, but they seemed to smile, they seemed to be nice. They probably didn't approve of what I was doing, but they seemed to care about me as a person. Now, I don't know if they thought that at night or whether they were high. I have no idea what they were doing at the end of the night, but that was in my own mind. And so then the next day, I come to work. Dennis and a couple of the girls were there, and one of the girls runs up and gives me a big hug. She's like, it's the religious guy. Okay, could have said Catholic, but we'll take it as religious guy. Religious guy gives me a big hug and does say, she's like, we were talking about you last night. Now, of course, in my mind, I'm like, really, what were you guys talking about? Just the girls, or was Dennis there? I don't know. I didn't really get into that answer, but they were talking, and again, I left it at that. I don't know what they were talking about, but I felt like maybe an impression was made. And so then after the girls left, I went up to Dennis, and I said, hey, Dennis, because Dennis, every time he sees me, gives me his card. He just insists on giving me this card. You got to come to Vegas. You got to come and see me. And so this time I said, would you mind if my buddy Father Jim sent a couple of his books to the girls? They can read, right? He said, yeah, they can read. So I said, well, if you wouldn't mind, we'll send a few books to the girls, and we'll just leave it at that. They don't have to read the books. You guys can burn the books. You can do anything you want with these things. But would you mind that? He's like, yeah, you guys can do whatever you want. You can come over and sign them. Again, he's always trying to get me into Vegas. I understand. But it's a high and a low of being Catholic, that we get to meet people where they are. And I told that story on my show that very day. And a lot of the callers and emails I got that day said, Lino, you seem to have done the right thing, because Jesus was friends with the prostitutes. He didn't leave them where they were, but he met them where they were and tried to bring them along. And I had plenty of other Catholics tell me what a horrible human being I was, because I wasn't judgmental, because I wasn't telling them they were going to hell, because I wasn't telling them what was probably what they expected me to tell them, because I'm the Catholic guy and they're prostitutes. And so, sometimes when we do things, I'm not saying I got it right, by the way. I'm just saying that's what I happened to do that day. So even the highs of trying to preach the gospel and using words if necessary, and being criticized when we get it wrong, because I know I definitely don't get it right all the time, can be a low. Which brings me back to one of the highs of confession, which is when you do screw everything up, going to confession. One of the big things about being Catholic is me going to confession.